Welcome to John Martin Talks, where we battle ignorance and apathy daily. The growing ignorance of just how special this experiment we call the United States of America is, and the apathy that we can't or won't do anything and everything to save her. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we got a special guest here with us today, live via Skype. And he is battling ignorance and apathy every single day. First, he battled his own and became, as they say, woke in a real way. And now he is battling that ignorance and apathy on the front lines politically every day. And his name is Brandon Morris. So without further ado, I give you Brandon Morris. All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, as promised, we have a great young man here, a guest on our show, Brandon Morris. I'll give you a few bits of background about him. He's from my neck of the woods, so to speak. He's from the big city of Gainesville, Florida, and I'm from the little town of Hawthorne, Florida. If you want to know where that is, all you got to do is look at one of those blue-red maps of the counties, and we're in that deep blue lake up in north central Florida that is called Alachua County. And we're going to find out how a young man who was raised up like I was, battling a blue wave their whole life, turned out to be a MAGA wearing hat guy. So we're going to get into that. But before we do, Brandon, let me just welcome you officially to the show. I greatly appreciate your time and thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
And I joked a little bit with you about this off the air, but we talked a little bit about David Webb and how he was accused of not understanding because of his white privilege by that CNN. So I just want to kind of get that out of the way. You don't, I mean, so our listeners aren't shocked. You're a black man, right?
Yeah, a black man. That if there's this white privilege, I hope I can find some, because, you know, other groups get to claim different things. So why not? Why can't I claim white privilege? I'm
kind of looking for mine as well, man. Yeah, but you know, I think, Brandon, really, you represent what I would call the progressive leftist worst nightmare. A young black male conservative who is you know, full bore gung ho like you are. And I wonder what your thoughts on that. Do you feel like you're in a sense their worst nightmare?
Oh yeah, before I even switched over, that's what I was told. There's nothing more scary than a black Republican to America, because you're going to think for yourself. You're not going to blame your surroundings. You're going to work hard, and you're going to do the right things as a conservative and as a Republican. And it couldn't be anything but true since I made that switch.
Well, you talked to me a little bit off the air about your story, and I want you to share it with. How in the world do you start out, especially like I say, in the blue of Alachua County in Gainesville, Florida? How do you go from being a liberal, because you kind of told me that you were, but I'll let you talk about that, to being a Trump supporter? How does that happen?
Well, basically, when I was I got into it with my two friends. I was one day in my room, and they were talking about all kind of issues, Black Lives Matter, police shooting, immigration, abortion. And I didn't want them to know I was home, because I'm thinking, oh, man, I'm living with a racist, you know. And so I kept my silence. And then a couple of weeks later, him and his friend came over. This guy named Dan Tracy, and his friend's name was Isaac. And I bust out the room when I heard them talk. And I was like, hey, I want to hear all that racist stuff that you guys were saying a couple of weeks ago. I was home. I just didn't want to tell you. And we debated for 2 hours. And at the end of the debate, it was the first time I felt stupid. Like, I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know what just happened, but I wanted to learn conservatism so that I can beat conservatives. I'm like, if I learn this stuff in and out, I'll be able to defeat conservatives. And within 3 months, I actually became a conservative, because I was like, oh my gosh, I'm on the wrong side of history. I saw social media. People were talking, basically rated Y being banned from Google. Stuff on Google was disappearing, YouTube, Facebook. I saw this with my own eyes, and I couldn't believe it. And I remember typing in, what is good about conservatives or Republicans in Google? And basically only 4 articles showed up, and it was from left-leaning sources. And I was like, that's weird. And that's what made me actually submit my voter registration card in. It was in March of last year, and became Republican. And it's been the greatest feeling ever since.
Well, welcome aboard. One of the things that, because I used to be a Democrat, I didn't tell you this, but I grew up in a Democratic family, an old blue dog, yellow dog, whatever they call it. My dad was a prominent elected official, and I made my decision back almost a decade ago now. And I'm not saying Republicans have all the answers, but what I found was that the Democrats, they were bankrupt of ideas, and all they kept talking about. I used to be a member of the Democratic Executive Committee. Now I'm a Republican Executive Committee member, and what I found was all they were talking about was the messaging. They just didn't get the messaging right. If they just got the message right, they would win. They didn't talk anything about the principles of what they were doing, and I wonder if you had a similar experience.
Yeah, no, it was I remember everything was based off of, racism. I was angry. I was angry at somebody, and it was always about, you need to point the finger at all these issues. And once I was able to research all these things about conservatism and being Republican, people who had similar experiences, they didn't blame, the outside sources. They was like, okay, what can I do? And if you look back in history, a lot of blacks, even during Jim Crow and some during slavery, they still pushed through no matter what was happening on the outside. They kept control of what was going on and with themselves. And so that kind of just aligned with who I was as a person. But yeah, I definitely didn't feel like the only message we had was, tax the rich. I used to argue with my bosses all the time. You make too much money. And us little people, we don't ever get anything, and you guys are just greedy. And I mean, I made a complete switch on every thought I had when I was on the left. I think the complete opposite now. Like I was like, oh, how did I think those things?
Well, it's kind of a way that they say you got woke, but
Yeah.
I don't think they meant it quite the way that you're finding. And you mentioned something about anger and all, and people sometimes ask me, well, how am I going to know whether I'm at the right meeting, like the Republican meeting? And I tell them, well, if you go in and everybody is like pissed off and miserable and shouting, then you're probably at the Democratic meeting, because Republicans in general are pretty happy. I mean, they're like, enjoying themselves. And it seems like the left especially is just totally pissed off these days.
Yeah, I remember, just to say, I remember when I used to tell people, I'm woke, and I tell them, no, I actually was in sleep paralysis, but now I'm actually woke. And so, I mean, I definitely agree with what you're saying, because people would, like, I know I was upset, and I would hear conservatives are happy. And I tell you, I like, without a shadow of a doubt, like yesterday, I lost my wallet. I was in the best mood, even after I lost my wallet. And I was like, if I was a liberal, guys, I'd have turned this whole place over trying to find my wallet. And it's a different mindset because of the ideology and just, accepting Christ back in my life. I'm always happy. And I was like, man, I was so angry because I was always trying to look for a problem when I was a liberal. And now that I'm conservative, it's about really trying to solve problems. And so that's a great feeling.
Well, I'm glad you said that about solving problems, because one of the things, I used to work as an alcohol and drug counselor for like 15 years. And I told my clients all the time that as long as you're in the problem, you're never going to be happy. You're always going to feel you're coming up short. But no matter how bad the problem is, if you start living in the solution, you're going to find some peace. You're going to find some acceptance and that kind of thing. And that's kind of what I hear you saying.
Yeah, no, it's true, because you're not making yourself a victim, and you're actually becoming a victor. And who doesn't like, being the hero in their own story, in their own life, and so instead of just going and looking for, just someone to point the finger to and blame, you can actually, hate to say it, but pull yourself up by the bootstraps and do the right thing. And, there's a lot of keys to success in America, and just following those that do those successful things, the American dream is still alive. So,
well, I have to admit to you that I was trolling your Facebook page earlier today, and first of all, I saw a bunch of souvenirs, because you're currently, I believe, in DC, and you went to CPAC. We're going to talk about that, but you had a picture of a bunch of MAGA stuff, and I wanted to show you one of my little souvenirs here my wife got me when she was in DC.
I will be the greatest president president that God ever created.
So this is, and he's got a million of them. You know, this is my little Trump psychic pen here.
I like it.
But
I like
I
it.
saw your pictures. But one of the things I saw was that you had several quotes and pictures of Frederick Douglass. And I was very impressed by that because I'm a history major, graduated from University of Florida, and Frederick Douglass has always been someone that I personally looked up to, and to see that you felt the same way. And when I read the quotes, and we got one of them up on the board, I could see why you would become the young man you're becoming. Because so talk about your reverence for, or if you will, for Frederick Douglass, and what examples guys like him have made for you.
Well, it was just the fact that he talked about the Constitution. He talked about the freedom and what the Republican Party stood for. And to me, the GOP platform of today still aligns with the Frederick Douglass of the past. And so about limited government, basically individual rights. I could relate to those things because of what, people throughout history, what my ancestors wanted to fight for, and that equality. There was those values that I really believe that Frederick Douglass ended up portraying. And so he was somebody who, even when I was in high school, I used to look to. Like a lot of the past prominent leaders, I didn't even know they were Republican. I just liked their stories, and I'm like, oh, that makes sense now. Now that I'm older, and I would go back and research who these people were and their political party.
I wish that it's kind of heartening to hear that you did learn about that at school, because I get the sense that a lot of young people of any any race would probably not be able to tell you much about Frederick Douglass right now, and that to me is a shame, because I've always thought that he was one of the truly great Americans, and his words, if you read like the quote that's there, the quotes before us, they're timeless, without a doubt. And I wanted to ask you a question, because I grew up in a very typical southern town of Hawthorne, and we were somewhat segregated, although that has changed now, and we've never had some of the problems that typical towns in the South had. But we had, for instance, I grew up farming and ranching, and we had a man that ran our ranch. Joe Smith was his name. He was a black man, and his wife basically was our maid, took care of us, and was like a mom to me. And I remember something when I was really young that Joe said to me. He was frustrated about something, and I asked him about it. I was just maybe 12 years old, but I'll never forget it. He said that as a black man trying to lift himself up was like coming out of a bucket of crabs, because other black folks he was talking about would reach up there and snatch him back down in it. And I never forgot that, and I've seen so many examples of that. And I wanted to ask you, have you experienced some of that resentment from other black Americans, African Americans, however you want to label it, for your decision? Could you talk about that?
Yes, just the other day, in fact, when I left CPAC, left the Gaylord, I had 5 different groups confront me because of my MAGA hat. Why are you wearing that hat, man? Oh, like you understand what you're doing? Like, and I would tell them, I'm like, make America great. Now everyone has that. There's no system besides, welfare state that holds you back. But you don't have Jim Crow. You don't have slavery. You have, back in those days, you had if you went in those areas, you had no immunity. You could have been LeBron James or anything, and they would have still, if you didn't move off the sidewalk for that white person walking by, you would have got in trouble. It wasn't maybe I'm going to get in trouble today. No, you're going to get in trouble. And so that's the difference. But yeah, since I become conservative, I would get called Uncle Tom. And I tell them, Uncle Tom was a hero, right? So I was like, you're giving me a compliment. But it's true. I mean, since most of my liberal friends, like over 90% of them, feel like I've abandoned them and that I'm on the wrong side. I'm in the party of racists. The people are racist now. The party switched. And I'm like, no, no. So I definitely get that, you need to come back or there's something wrong with you. What happened to you? And I'm like, no, I left the plantation. You can't bring me back.
Well, when you were talking, it reminded me of something. Just recently, well, it's been I guess in the fall of last year, I was asked to be on this panel here locally, and the the discussion was whether or not the black vote in America was being taken for granted, in this case, primarily from the Democratic Party. And the chair of the Democratic Party, you may be familiar with her here locally, Cynthia Chestnut, she was on that with me. And basically, I went in there as the Republican Executive Committee member and state committee man, and I just told them flat out, yeah, your vote is being taken for granted, because if you do something over and over again, regardless of what happens, then your vote by human nature is going to be taken for granted. And I wonder, first of all, do you agree that the black vote in America is being taken for granted by the Democratic Party?
Oh yeah. I know that you would hear people say the only time they see anybody that comes in their neighborhood is during, election time. And so one of the things that I know that the Democrats, they feel like they don't have to really go out and campaign that much, because just like my brother told me a couple of weeks ago, I'm always vote Democrat. I've been a Democrat for the rest of my life. I don't care what you tell me. I'm a Democrat. So I feel like they banked on people who were just feeling like, oh, well, my grandparents voted Democrat. My mom and dad voted Democrat, so I should vote Democrat because that's just the way how it always worked. The Democrats freed us from slavery. The Democrats, passed
wow.
the civil rights. But it's that kind of mindset that that Lincoln did it, but you were just like, all right, he just did it because he wanted to save the Union. He was still a racist, and that's the kind of thing that most people think about when they think about the Republican Party. Like, oh, that's the party of racism.
Yeah, well, I guess the only way we can do that is to combat that is continue to educate people. And that's why, in fact, like I said at the top of the show, that a guy like you is their worst nightmare, because let's face it, an old white bread dude like me is going to have a hard time convincing some people, but they may actually listen to you. I mean, I'm not unwilling to do it by any stretch. One thing about me, I will just tell it like it is. But, having someone like you has got to terrify them. Well, Brandon, we were talking about how you kind of, in a sense, walked away from the Democratic Party. And I saw on your Facebook that you had a picture with Brandon, and I'll probably botch his name up, Straka, who created the walkaway movement. Did you meet him at CPAC?
Yes, I met him at CPAC. I actually sought him out, and I told him, I said, hey, I see that you have a walkaway on your shirt. You want to hear my walkaway story? And he's like, sure. And after the interview, and I told him what I told you guys earlier, he was like, you had one of the most unique walkaway stories, because most people do it because, they've learned something. He's like, you did it because you were competitive. And he was like, I'm going to show these conservatives, like, I'm going to learn your side. And then I'll beat you in the debate next time. And he was just like, you don't hear stories like that. So he's like, that was very unique.
Well, the truth has a way of kind of slapping you upside the head, my old daddy used to say. It just has a way of doing that. Well, tell us a little bit about your CPAC experience, because it looked like you had a grand time, and I know the president was there and quite a few others. Talk about CPAC, because I'm a bit envious of you. I have yet to get there, but maybe I could correct that this time next year. Talk about CPAC and your experience there.
I went to CPAC as a volunteer, and so I got to see like both sides of just as an attendee and a volunteer. It was an amazing. It was an amazing experience. The staff was great. The other volunteers were great. The people, because it was my first time being around like a bunch of Trump people, for Trump. And what I still kind of had maybe what the news would say about these rallies, so I didn't know what to expect. And the best way I can describe it is like when you go to a church as a new member and everyone is so loving and, hey, how are you? Hugs. And it was just not just with me, but just with everyone, to like just watching how friendly and how loving everybody was. It was something great. And I look forward to next year. Like, I mean, it's marked down on my calendar. It's like Christmas to me. I'm like, yep, I just wish this thing could start every weekend. I wish they could have a CPAC every weekend.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you should mention about how it is. I remember the first Trump rally I went to. I've been to a couple. One when he was still candidate Trump, and then another last year when he was campaigning for the 2018 midterms. But in the first one, and you'll know this because you're from the area, I went up to Jacksonville to the new Veterans Arena they have up there, and I went to it and I got out in time to get back home just about the time CNN was kind of broadcasting it. And it was like, wow, whoa, wait a minute. They must have been at a totally different event than I was, because their broadcast was all about hate and anger and everything else. And to me, as I say, it was the first one I'd been to. It was basically a love fest, man. Everybody from all corners of the walks of life was just really happy to be there and happy to see other people there.
Yeah, no, I agree. I remember I got close. I got to see Trump speaking. I was able to look around, talk to people. No one left. The guy talked for 2 hours and 45 minutes. And when people started to leave, it was like their flight's about to leave. And it was well over 2 hours after into his speech. And I remember I was like, you know what? I'm going to check CNN and see what they say like a couple of hours later. And they had so much negativity. And I was like, were we at the same thing? Because I was like, none of that happened. It was even the way he talked. I was like, now I know. No, it's no different from when an athlete speaks and they chop up his thing and make it sound like, they're saying this or that. That's exactly what I thought about. I'm like, I saw this with my own eyes. None of that happened. He didn't say anything that was homophobic or xenophobic or, we need to do like this. I was like, man, how can you hate this guy? I don't know. It's so crazy. You know what? The media does a good job, because I used to hate him, thinking that he was all these things. And just to see firsthand, I'm like, yeah, I know, like, I've lost all credibility for most of these news outlets that talk about, Trump or MAGA supporters, because it's not true.
Well, what I find is, and it's kind of what you were trying to sound like do with your friends when you kind of had your conversion, so to speak, that the left can't really argue facts. When they always get to a point where they either get real emotional and talk about their feelings, or they just give you the finger and walk away, so to speak. They can't seem to actually debate actual facts. Have you run into that as well?
I get that all the time. I hear that, you can give them gun stats. I'll tell them how many people commit suicide to the 40,000 that the CDC shows. I'll tell them about, now you're down to maybe 14,000, and then you take away the criminal and gang violence. Now you're down to like maybe 8,000. You take away the accidental, and even rifles. Rifle haven't even broke 400 deaths yet, but somehow rifles are so terrible. Fists and kicks kill more people than the rifle does, but apparently all guns are just terrible. So even just giving out those stats, or even gun control has happened since the 1950s. And 99% of gun control areas, and still with those stats, people are like, no, it's not true. Guns are terrible. Guns have done this. And it's like, what about blaming the person behind the gun? And so what I would do to make sure my guns don't get out of hand, when I walk in the door, I'll take a belt and whip the bullets and the guns and make sure they stay on task, and tell them, listen, don't you get out of hand.
Yeah, well, it amazes me too, because when you look at it, the cities that have the toughest gun control laws there are some of the most dangerous places to be. It's places where you absolutely don't want to be. Well, yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the issues kind of the moment. There's some things that have been, there's one today. I know you've been very busy. You may or may not have followed this, but today, basically, the House, the Democratic House, voted on this bill that was supposed to be a censure of this Ilhan Omar for her anti-Semitic comments, but basically became a whitewash, if you will, of a generic, we opposed to all kinds of hate. Have you been following the Ilhan Omar story at all? And if so, do you have any thoughts on that?
I haven't, because I was in Future Candidate School today, haven't had a chance, but I just know, like, when I hear her speak, I'm like, wait a minute, we brought you over to America, to embrace you and for you to embrace our culture. Because we accept all religion. But the great part is that, you kind of accept the American culture. What does it mean? The American dream. And when you hear the stuff, like, I remember, I think she had a quote that she's afraid of America because of Trump and the racist America, that she can't wear a hijab or whatever. And I was like, wait, back at home, if you dressed the way you dressed, I'm pretty sure they would have stoned you. So I was like, what are you even talking about? Like, so I don't get the hate that she speaks of and all the things. Cause like, we embraced you with open arms to come into our country. where over 7 million people will love to be every year, will love to be in your shoes. And here you are, you're spitting on that. And what, that the fact that America embraced you with open arms. So it's confusing. Like, I mean, and so she said some very hateful things, and let that have been a white male saying something, any of those type of things, he's a racist. So I tell you, I'm not for reverse racism, because Dr. Martin Luther King said, judge a person by their character, not by the color of their skin. And I don't like where our party plays, our country plays into party politics with some people, and you have it on both sides. And I'm like, listen, it's a e pluribus unum, many have won. And we have different cultures, we have different things, but the greatest thing, we have a lot of opportunity here. If you work hard, you do the right things, and your work speaks for itself. Capitalism will, benefit you. If you create something that people want, capitalism will benefit you. So I don't get this whole, oh, it's so terrible. Like, and the left has done a good job of the brainwashing. That's all I can say. They've done their.
Well, you mentioned our kind of motto or creed of e pluribus unum, and one of the things I talk about, I mention that all the time on the show, because basically the left, the progressive left, keep talking about diversity. We're diversity. And yes, we are a very diverse country, and we welcome diversity, and we've used diversity to make us an exceptional nation. But the diversity is supposed to go through e pluribus unum, from the many, one. We take all this diversity, take the best of everything, combine it together for the American system. And it's very heartening to hear you say that, and what Dr. King, because I pray literally every day that we will reach that point that we judge people on the content of their character rather than the color of their skin. And I thought, to be honest with you, maybe I wasn't intending to ask you this, but since we kind of got on it, I really thought, Brandon, that we were moving in that direction. I'm not saying, because I've said many, many times, you cannot legislate what's in a man's heart. So there is racism, there's going to be it. But institutional racism, government basically supported, I felt like we were really on our way to Dr. King's dream in that. And I have to tell you that the presidency of Barack Obama, when I was first I'm just speaking as a white male person from the South, I was hopeful that he would truly be the, quote, first black president, and that he would bring some healing. But it seems to me that things are worse now than when he first got elected. Am I off track with that?
No, I remember I used to get in debates on like ESPN when people would say that Obama divided America more than Trump. And I used to argue it. And now being on the other side, it's easy to see that because of identity politics. And I remember a couple of weeks ago, maybe some months, there was a guy who was given a speech at UF, and he was saying how Martin Luther King, if he was alive, he would spit in America's face. I was offended because I grew up, again, those black prominent history leaders. Martin Luther King was my favorite. I would study his speech and everything. And so I'm thinking about all the stuff that he was saying, when he's talking about the racists in Mississippi and Georgia, little black boys, little black girls holding hands together with little white boys and little white girls. And I'm looking at this poet, and I'm looking around the University of Florida, and I'm seeing mixed couples, all these different races that's inside listening to you speak. And I'm like, his dream has come alive. Like, are you kidding me? So for me personally, what he talked about in that speech, it's alive. And I tell people now, I think Larry Elder said it best. 20 years ago, 4% of Americans thought Elvis was still alive. You're going to still have ignorant people. If you actually think you're going to cure racism, you're doing yourself a disservice. Brazil is one of the most diverse countries in the world. They have more racist laws than America. One of my friends from Cameroon, and she's like, there's no white people there. And you know what? There's a hierarchy for the people who speak English compared to the people who don't speak English. So you're going to always have this hierarchy. There are certain things you're going to have to tolerate. When I say hierarchy, as in a difference of opinion or a difference, you're going to have bad people in this world. You can't, like you said, you can't cure what's in somebody's heart. They have to do it on themselves. And the way the left keeps making it seem like we're living in this system, I'm like, listen, Jim Crow ended in the 65. What is holding you back in 2019? Or point to white supremacy. Point to what you're telling me, this white privilege. Because me as a black person, growing up poor and foster care and everything, I had a lot of opportunities that most white Americans wouldn't get. I had an easier access to go to college. You know, I didn't have the highest GPA. You can't, like you said, you can't cure what's in somebody's heart. They have to do it on themselves. And the way the left keeps making it seem like we're living in this system, I'm like, listen, Jim Crow ended in the 65. There's what is holding you back in 2019? Or point to white supremacy. Point to what you're telling me, this white privilege. Because me as a black person, growing up poor and foster care and everything, I had a lot of opportunities that most white Americans wouldn't get. I had an easier access to go to college. You know, I didn't have the highest GPA when I left Santa Fe, and I got into UF compared to my friends who had 3.8s, 3.9s that were white from the middle class. And so I realized the privilege that I had. I know I had privilege from being athletic compared to somebody who wasn't athletic. You know, if you're beautiful, you get certain things that you might get a job over a person who doesn't look that appealing. So I tell people there's always some type of thing, but if you're thinking that you're about to make this world a utopia, humans are flawed. We're going to always be flawed. And therefore, you're going to have people that just don't get along with everyone. And so that's my opinion on it. Like, it's ridiculous that what our ancestors fought for throughout history, they would love to be living in this time in 2019. This is what they fought for. And now that people are spitting on that and are saying that, I tell people, you're more oppressed than what your ancestors who got hoes, beat, cut stomachs open, saw their babies get killed right before them. I'm like, you're definitely more oppressed than people who went through slavery.
Yeah, well, there's a book out there that a lot of people kind of forgot about. It says something about all of us falling short of the glory. I mean, I can't. The name of it escapes me at the moment, but people might want to. Yeah. It's been around a while. But check it out. Well, you talked about something, and I was thinking about it as you were talking. About this whole controversy of like the statues and that kind of thing. There was a statue that was removed here in Alachua County that, to be honest with you, was such a small part. I don't think most people even knew it was there until they brought attention to it. But my feeling, Brandon, is that we should teach all of our history, the good, the bad, and the ugly of it. And I'm not defending the Confederacy or anything like that. But to me, we need to talk about the Civil War, the both sides of it, because the only way you're going to understand the courage, like we talked about earlier, of Frederick Douglass and a Harriet Tubman of the world and people like that, is to understand the true history. So how do you feel about this focus of like whitewashing, if you will, or in this case, maybe blackwashing history, just wiping history away like it never happened? How do you feel about that?
I agree. It's all American history. While up here in D.C., I end up going to the African American Museum, and I saw a lot of stuff. But when I posted it in American history because it's a part of American history. As much as you want to, and we had an ugly history. We know that. We know that what happened with the Confederate soldiers. But like you said, you should be able to know both sides of history or all sides of history and let the person decide for themselves. Not try to hide certain stuff because, again, even though I like Frederick Douglass, I didn't know he was a Republican when I learned about that in high school. I didn't know anything about Republican values until last year. So it's something where I think that we need to be honest about our history, but I'm pretty sure the Democrats don't want that because then people realize, hell, these guys were the racists. So I see that. And I tell people, I think the Democrat Party should admit their racist history, but they don't. And of course, because they're still doing racist things now in the black community. So
well, see, I maintain all along, and I saw this, as they say, I saw how the sausage was made because I was an elected Democratic official at one point. The Democratic Party's basic plan is identity politics, as they call it now. Basically, what I say is they chop people up into these disparate groups, get them all pissed off, and then get a common boogeyman. In this case, it's Donald Trump, which is the perfect one for, and then unify them behind that common boogeyman. So I don't know how you feel about that, but to me, that strategy, and they cannot have a person like you stand up because it goes away from the narrative. And see me, they can say, oh, well, you just got woke to the racist SOB you really are, that kind of thing. But for you, they can't explain you. You know what I mean? So do you agree with me that that's basically the way the Democrats look at things?
Oh yeah, and I even try to tell Republicans, we got again the message. Don't shoot the messenger. The fact that if a white person is saying the exact same thing, you should kind of tune into, because that's what happened to me. These guys were white that talked to me. It wasn't black people that told me this, because I probably would have thought the same thing, like, oh man, you ain't woke, brother. But outside of that, I think it was great for me to learn for myself about what conservatives, what it is. Because if I didn't, I don't care if anybody would have came to try to tell me certain things. I was stubborn. So I kind of understand. And it took me 3 months to actually make the jump. Even though I was seeing all these facts in front of my face, I was like, this can't be true. I was still in denial. But once I saw what was happening to Christians, and at the time I wasn't even going to church. I didn't consider myself a Christian. I was like, oh man, this is real and this is not fake. That the same way that my ancestors went through a fight, I'm seeing conservatives go through this fight, and I don't want to be on the wrong side of history by standing by and allowing these people get bullied for just trying to keep individual liberty alive over government control.
Yeah, well, you mentioned your faith, and I appreciate that. I wanted to ask you about this whole idea that's come out now of what I guess Rush Limbaugh has basically said it best, fourth trimester abortions. When they talk about like what happened in Virginia, where you had this governor, of course, he's got all the controversy. The Democrats are mad at him because he said blackface, but the idea that you could have a baby born, he literally described it, make it comfortable, and then decide whether or not to kill it. And then Mario Cuomo, who said America was never that great, the governor of New York, when his whole family history shows how great America is, and the glee in which he signed. I don't know if you've seen that video. If you hadn't, check it out, where they're signing that abortion bill that basically signed into law what they talked about in Virginia. How has that, because it's personally had an impact on me, because I just don't see how anybody can defend that type of stuff. And it's pushed me to a point to where I feel like that I got to take a stand on it. I wonder, what are your thoughts on that in general? And this is one area I think that the black community needs to get woke to, because Planned Parenthood, for instance, was targeted specifically at black neighborhoods as a type of genocide, and most people don't have any idea. And I ranted a little bit there, but this issue really bothers me, and I wonder how you feel about it.
When I tell you that I end up doing a complete switch, I was pro-choice maybe 16 months ago, because I thought, like, it is the woman body, she's going through whatever, and that's her choice. But since I become conservative and more knowledgeable about it, I was in nursing school as well when I was studying conservatism. And when we were around that time, we were doing, I think we were doing pediatrics. And you're realizing that at like 3 weeks, the baby has a heartbeat, and then even just biology, once, the basic form of life, a cell is a basic form of life. So you're already admitting that's a life right when you have the sperm and the egg meet. And the fact that, what people could go all the way to the end when this baby's born, that you can kill. I tell people, if you don't think it's a life, what happens when a woman's pregnant at any point in time and a perpetrator kills her? What do they do? Double homicide. So I was like, that is a life. It's insane to me that as a country, you have some people that have lost their morals, that they're okay with killing babies but they don't want to kill a cow or something, you know. Oh no, that life is important, but to kill that baby, that's okay. And I also talk to people about, if you really believe that in your message, why can't a woman, because people will say, well, the baby's surviving off of me, that's my body, so the baby wouldn't survive if it wasn't for me. Well, what about people who have babies outside the womb that's 1 or 2 years old? Why can't they just kill their baby then? Because the baby's going to need that guardian or whatever to survive. So they should just be able to do that. And they're like, no. But I'm like, you're making that argument. So it's just, once you just go through the whole thing and you just destruct how evil and how immoral. My mom, honestly, my dad left my mom when she was 3 months pregnant. And my mom was going to abort me. She thought about it. She was upset. She was so hurt. And my brothers and sisters the gap is over 10 years. And she was like, I was contemplating it. And one day she woke up and her TV wasn't working. And when the TV ended up getting pictured this one random night, and she said it was on, it was scribbly, but it came in as clear as possible. And this preacher was preaching about abortion. And he was talking about not aborting your baby, because you can never know if this baby will grow up and be a doctor, a lawyer, could change history. And my mom and I struggled a lot growing up, but she always say, if it wasn't for you, Brandon, I don't know where I would be. And I sometimes think back, man, just imagine she would have never saw that show. You know, I probably wouldn't have been here. But, you know, God made a way for that to come in, that gray and black, that white and black TV to unscramble, and the message came through clearly. And I felt like that message was for her, because everybody who I talked to, no matter when I was living here or lived in New York for a little while, I will always get told, you're different, you know, and just, you see the smile that you can just put on other people's faces, and just knowing that I was maybe one night away from, if she never saw that I probably would have been just like whoever, you know, future presidents or somebody who could have found a cure for cancer that, you know, were killed because of people didn't want that child, or didn't want that responsibility.
Yeah, well, you're right, and baby could grow up to be about anything. It could grow up to be Brandon Morris, and that, from what I can see, ain't too bad a thing to be. So, you know, hey, hallelujah that she found that out. I kind of feel the same way, because I've said on my show that basically I've kind of evolved, and the left has pushed me into directions I never would have thought that I'd have been. And this issue is the best example, because I kind of grew up thinking, it's not really not concerned. Then I kind of went to, it's not really my business, it's whoever's involved in it, to I fell into that trap of safe, legal, and rare. But now I got to the point to where, how can I defend this? And then they pushed it so far that I basically said, I got to speak out on it. You know, so it sounds like you and I are on the same path on that journey. And I think a lot of men, they're going to regret this, because I think a lot of men, especially, and women too, but a lot of men were open to just basically saying, I don't really want to talk about that. But it's kind of hard not to when it's with the passion they bring to it. That's what's baffling to me, Brandon, is the joy and passion they seem to bring to what, no matter what, is a sad situation. I just don't get it.
I think Reagan said it best, and I'm paraphrasing, but he's like, for those that want abortion, you know, they're already here. So, you know, you're already here. You didn't get aborted, so you're for it, you know.
Well, I kind of made a joke about it, according to that Virginia governor, basically, and nobody's safe till their mama's dead. You know, I mean, my mom's 97 years old. Could she turn around and have a change of heart now? I certainly hope not. But so one thing I was thinking about, Brandon, was this Jesse Smollett case, and you know, it's offensive on so many levels. But I was thinking that if I were a black man, I think this particular action, because this guy had it everything. You talk about the American dream. He was literally living the American dream. And I just feel like if I were a person of color, that I would be even more offended by what he did. And I wonder what your thoughts on that were.
Yeah, I mean, to me, just to go out and try to like push racism or anger and hatred is opposite, because for me, we know what that was like. So why are you trying to, you know, our parents told us what that racism and that hatred was like from one side. So why are you trying to spread hate? And especially for me being a Trump supporter, you know, I'm like, innocent people could get hurt. wearing their Trump stuff because of you're just spreading a lie, because for whatever reason you're taking, just what the media is telling you, instead of going and actually talking to people who wear MAGA hat, who are Trump supporters, to actually learn for yourself. So that was very troubling for me, that he did not want to actually step across the other side, and just, meet somebody at the table and say, hey, I feel this way, because that's what happened to me. I would have preconceived notions about groups or sets of people, and I wanted to learn for myself. So I'm like, all right, let me go and speak to this person and find out, why this racist or this Asian or this Mexican, why you believe what you, and then they're like, none of that's true. I am Brandon Morris. This what makes me who I am. I'm not what you see on TV. I'm not that. So I really felt like, that's what he should have did. But I think he did a disservice to not only himself, but he made the people on the left look stupid. He made people who might be black on the left side look stupid, because a lot of people got behind him and really was like, aha, I told you that these people are racist. And it's like, nah, this guy, and the fact that he's still sticking to his story, it's like, nah, you need some help, bro. Like, you need some legit help.
Yeah, he does, and I hope he gets it. I mean, he's a troubled young man. There's no doubt about it. And something he said about how he could have talked to the other side reminds me of like Kanye West. Kanye West, you love him, hate him. I mean, he's got some issues. There's no doubt about it. But at least he made an effort to actually, and had the courage to speak out. And he wasn't the most artful at doing it. And I don't know how much I trust it all and everything else. So, but what really got me about that, and feel free to comment on all of it, but what really got me was how he was treated, like by people like Don Lemon on CNN. I call him Don the Lemon. I mean, they literally got up there on CNN and might as well called him an Uncle Tom. I mean, that's basically what they did, and they called him everything but a child of God, and they did that on national TV. I can only imagine what they were saying behind the scenes, and the way they treated him, it broke my heart to see that, because that's not the America we're supposed to be. That is so far away from Dr. King's dream or Frederick Douglass's dream, and I'm assuming Brandon Morris's dream. But can you talk about how that made you feel when you saw all of that, when you saw a panel of black Americans literally crushing this guy on national TV? It saddened me greatly.
Yeah, it broke my heart, because what I learned a long time ago when I was in 2008, I remember, if you think different from what the Democratic Party, so I remember I was going to vote for Obama, but I just wanted to find out what John McCain policy was about. And I always would take both policies and read them. And I remember all the threats that I got from my friends, some family. They was like, how dare you plan on voting for a Republican or a white guy, not for the first black president. And I was like, what happened if he's the next Hitler? I don't care. So it was the same thing with Kanye West when he talked about just being independent and thinking for yourself. You don't do that outside the left. You think like the group think. If they tell you to hate somebody, you hate that person. If you don't hate them, there's something wrong with you if you don't have mob mentality. And as a Democrat, I went through that even in 2004 when I could vote. I didn't trust John Kerry, because I was like, this guy I don't know what he's talking about. But I was like, Bush kind of makes sense. And I remember hearing my family like, listen, you vote for Bush, you might as well move out this house. And so I was like, but the policies make sense on the right than the left. And that was me as a Democrat. So I was afraid to actually go against the grain, even if I know in the booth, you can make your own choices. I was afraid to do it. And so I can understand Kanye West took a lot of beating from, it's that crab in the bucket. You try to do something that's not part of the crowd. Oh man, you think you're better than us? What are you doing telling people to think for themselves? Like, what did Kanye West say that was so threatening? He only just told people, hey, you don't have to be a Democrat. Think for yourself. And all those people just kept telling, oh, he don't know what he's talking about. That's the mental issues. And I'm like, how crazy is that? Because even when you're growing up, what your parents probably tell you, be a leader, not a follower. That was something we were always told. It's like when you're growing up, now it's the opposite. Be a follower, not a leader, because If you do, we're gonna beat you up or we're gonna call you names. And it's really confusing because I know that was something that was always taught the black communities I was around.
Well, and hey, by the way, I'm glad you used my old crab in the bucket. Feel free to take that and play it out because that's time-honored logic that came out. But you mentioned something when you were talking about this. It made me think of President Trump on the campaign trail, and he was a great candidate. I mean, he beat Hillary because he was one of the things, his ideas were better, but he was better campaigner. And I thought when he went to that predominantly black church in Detroit, I believe it was, and essentially just said, hey, what do you got to lose? To me, it was like, as someone who has lived in a community that's like, and where I grew up, 50-50 black, white, it rings and has battled this system in Alachua County where we're both from, this Blue Lake. It rings so true. Because, what have you got to lose? It's like, has black America, and I'm not talking about this all just because you happen to be black, but, you should know it better than me. I mean, what progress have they really made? I look at like Gainesville, where you're from, and I could make a case that East Gainesville, for instance, which is the predominantly black neighborhoods in Gainesville, they're worse shape now than they've ever been. There is no sense of community there and everything else. So I think when Trump, and I'm ranting, I get on these, by the way, as you probably noticed, when President Trump had the courage or the audacity, if you will, to go there and just say, hey, what do you got to lose? I got to believe that resonated with some people in the black community.
Yeah, I remember at the time, because when he said that, I was a liberal. I'm like, oh, this is all staged. What is he talking about? But now, like when I educated myself, I tell people, I'm like, the Democrats been over our neighborhoods, over our communities, inner cities, almost every inner city in America since the 1960s. What has improved? If you look what the characteristics of a slave plantation was, you have that right now in 2019 in these inner city areas. And, like I tell people with the welfare state, like I would talk to people and say, this is one of the worst things that ever happened to our community because it incentivizes single motherhood. You have to be below the poverty line in order to get the benefit. So how is that supposed to help you get out of poverty? And I mean, the Democrats are pushing like, oh, let us help you. Let the government. And you have some on the right that kind of say the same thing, too. But let those rhinos, as we say, but let the government take care of you.
Swamp rats.
Yeah, let the government take care of you. And I ask people, when in history have any government from 10,000 years ago to now cared about the interests of the people first, where you, the individual, could care for yourself? And so East Gainesville, because I went to the east side in 2005. And when I moved away, I went to the other side. I remember making a vow. I'm like, I'm never going back to the hood or the ghetto and stuff. And I barely would go to the east side of town. But I've been going over there sparingly through the years, but lately a lot since I moved over there. And I'm like, this is still the same from 14 years ago. It has not changed. Not one bit. It's all the same. And I mean, they're almost the same stores, the same rundown houses. And I'm like, wow, like, why is this the way it is? And I tell people, that if I ever try to run for office, I'm told you either run as a Democrat or non-party affiliated in Gainesville. You don't run as a Republican. And I'm like, that's sad that we have the inner cities have that control. The Democrats have that control over people so that they can stay on that slave plantation and keep people down.
Yeah, it definitely has been working for a long time in Gainesville and Alachua County. And we're kind of getting short on time, but I wanted to talk about a couple of more things. What are your thoughts in general on President Trump and the job he's doing? He's going through this Emergency Act deal and the wall and putting America first and everything, because one of the things I said to you earlier off the air is I joke about it. My listeners will know exactly. I say that Donald Trump, they call him a racist. Well, he's the worst racist in history because he absolutely sucks at it. If you're a white supremacist, the last thing you want to do is black unemployment be at an all-time low, black businessship at an all-time high. high and black home ownership at all time high. If he's a racist, he sucks at it. But what in general are your feelings about Donald Trump, both as the man, as a president, and the direction he's going and what he's up against? Just give me your general feelings on
the
it.
guy is getting paid $1 per year. I don't know what rich person don't want $400,000. So I was like, that's number one. Two, prison reform. What racist is going to do prison reform? As we know that blacks lead the population in incarceration in the U.S. What racist president would do that? And I think he's doing. I mean, in 2 years, all the things he's done, I'm like, he can sit down right now, quit, and he'll be in the conversation as one of the greatest presidents in just 2 years. And so even with the emergency, I know a lot of people don't. They have this opinion or that opinion. But I ask people, I say, do you not lock your doors? Like if you don't feel that way, why don't you leave your doors open for me and leave your windows open? And in fact, why don't you take some of the legal immigrants in if that's the way you feel? Because Trump doesn't hate immigrants. He wants people to come in legally. Or then you hear people say, well, he separates children. And I'm like, wait a minute. So when you go to jail here in America for breaking the law, do you get to bring your children with you? And they're like, no. So what do you? I'm like, when those people cross that line without going to the entry point, they broke the law. So a lot of the stuff that he's doing it's common sense to me. But I have friends like, how could you support that racist? Or how can? And I'm like, the guy's doing a great job. He's doing phenomenal. He gave tax cuts to the rich. And I'm like, who you think hires you? Who you think gives you everything, your clothes, your shoes, your medicine that they invest in, the technology, the rich? No, what poor person ever gave you a job? Nobody ever gave me no job. So Trump's doing a phenomenal job. I know in 2016, when he got elected, I thought the world was going to end. 2020, he has my vote. I was like, this guy stands for America first. Just like when people are at home, they make sure their home's in order first before they go out and help anybody else. So I'm like, Trump is doing the exact same thing. He wants to fix the house. You want to make sure you clean your house up, whatever, before you have visitors come over. He's doing that. And he's making sure his house is in order before he goes out and make sure that he could tell it. It's like what Jesus said. Why are you going to try to take the plank out of the splinter out of somebody else's eye when you got a plank in your own? And everything Trump is doing, to me, he follows exactly what Jesus said in that message.
Well, you know, the book also that we were talking about earlier says no man shall know the end of time, but I guess Ocasio-Cortez is no man, so she knows that we only got 12 years left, so, you know, you better let it fly while you can, brother, out there. But you mentioned Trump's tax cuts, and this is something I don't think the Republican Party, quite frankly, has done a good enough job on. I don't know if you're aware of this, because quite frankly, I wasn't till recently, but part of Trump's tax cuts, talking about inner cities and the problems you mentioned, which are absolutely true, there are empowerment zones in this tax cut for businesses to come and develop. And Fiat Chrysler is going to now, because of the Trump tax cut plan, is going to build the first plant in almost 40 years in Detroit. They've announced that, and they're doing it specifically because of the Trump tax plan. And I got to think that that's going to make a big difference in Detroit, which is, you know, obviously the textbook case of everything that's wrong with a lot of our cities. But so I don't know if you're aware of that, but if you aren't, we need to get aware, because that's the kind of thing that we need to tell people and show people that this is something that President Trump deserves pretty much full credit for.
Yeah, like Andrew Mullins said in the 90s, and he's known as one of the greatest Secretary of States of all time, next to Alexander Secretary of Treasury, excuse me. And he said that give the large corporation tax break so that it could trickle down in the form of jobs to the general public. And I know tax codes have changed, but right away when Trump signed that tax budget plan, didn't Apple just say we're coming right away over there? We're bringing our headquarters back. We're going to invest $60 billion per year for 30 in the next 5 years, $360 billion. And I mean, I didn't hear about that with what's going on in Detroit. But when you have more money, you can do more. You can hire more people. You can create more jobs. I remember what it was like when Obamacare and the taxes that was happening. Again, I was liberal. It made me hate Obama in 2012. I didn't vote for him. I voted for Gary Johnson because while I was in college, nobody wanted to hire only one full-time employee. Everyone else, you couldn't go over 25 hours. And consistently, Obamacare is doing this to us. Obamacare. And I was like, you guys are just greedy. So once I actually learned that when you can give the rich a tax cut, they can't just sit on it like Scrooge McDuck. They have to reinvest it. They want to make money. And so hats off. And then look what happened in in Queens with Alexandria Cortez and Amazon. You try to tell these corporations, no, like they're going to try to make too much money. $3 billion compared to $27 billion over time. That's 24. You're going to make $24 billion and you're saying that's a terrible thing. And then there's 25,000 jobs that were lost. Socialism kills the middle class. So when these politicians talk about it, I tell people that when I used to hear in college, the rich want to get rich and the poor get poor, and they would tell us it was capitalism. I'm like, no. I definitely know now socialism is that system, because when you lower the bar, you can't go past that bar under financial equality. You have to go as fast as the slowest person. So you have to meet them down there, while the politicians and the people at the top, that ruling class, their reward is to get all your money, and they're gonna. So it's crazy that people are actually believing in the system, and they're doing a good job, like the Bernie Sanders of the world, and Alexandria Cortez, just selling this pipe dream, and people don't know they're voting for their own enslavement. That's what I tell them. Like, you don't know you're voting yourself poor, and if you don't think that income inequality is when the rich does better, the poor does better. There are poor people that got a better phone than me. Okay, I was like, listen, you can only get that because of innovation and it trickling down, not the other way around. So you look around the world, people that don't have the free market and don't use free market systems, you see the lead at the top having everything and everybody else is poor. So I don't know the America that people are voting for and why they believe in this pipe dream, but I tell them, like, you get what you want, you're going to be upset because those businesses are going to leave, and the only way they'll stay, we have to do what Hitler did, and that's kill the rich. I don't think we're going to be that unethical. So
I hope not. Well, we're pretty much out of time, Brandon. So first of all, I want to say thank you again for coming on the show. But before we leave, just can you tell us what you're up to now, how you're preparing yourself? And because I tell our listeners all the time that, we got to have fighters. Not everybody can be a fighter. I consider myself one, but everybody can be a supporter. And you're clearly a fighter, and you're really out there on the front lines. So tell us a little bit about what you're currently doing and how our listeners may or may not be able to help you now or in the future.
Well, right now I'm in DC doing future candidate school. I'm also helping out the Republican Party there with community outreach. I go door to door. I knock on people's doors. I talk to them about, the system. I talk politics all the time, even when I'm at the Rotary with people. And I think that if you make things tangible and common sense in their own way, tell the story, the light can click off for people. It might not change. It took me a while to change, but a lot of people are upset. And, when you ask people, hey, do you want more taxes? Or do you want less taxes? They're like, less. And, and most people are conservative. So those are the things that I'm doing. And just being up here at Future Candidate School, I'm learning a lot about how, the backgrounds behind, like I know a lot of the politic area, but you're learning the background and what makes a successful campaign, because one day I do want to run. I see my community. I see how my state, I see how the nation is going. And I want to be on the front lines to fight socialism, I want to fight for what our founding fathers against mob mentality, because the Klan ran mob mentality. And if that didn't happen, or the racists would have had their way, we would still be in slavery. So I tell people this, it's about individual freedoms. The individual should be able to make choices on his own. And if you want to give your money to this or that, that's your choice. Shouldn't have a gun to your head on decisions. And when I hear one of the things when I do education, when I hear people say healthcare is a right, Bernie said healthcare is a right, or minimum wage is a right, or raising the minimum wage is a right. I'm like, go through the Constitution and tell me in there, everything's a choice. Freedom of speech, you can use it or not. Own a gun, you can use it or not. Everything's a choices. But when you have a gun to your head and you get charged for not having health insurance, that's not a right. because all the other rights, it's all about choices. So my whole thing is just trying to educate people. I want educated citizens. So my goal down the road is to run and actually tell people. And when I do, I don't want people to vote for me because I'm black. I tell them, no, learn my policies, question what I'm talking about, be an educated citizen, be proactive. And don't donate to me if you think you're gonna you could try to bribe me, because I'm very stubborn, and I believe in having integrity. That's why I want to run as a Republican one day, because I believe in what the values of the GOP and what it stands for, and keeping the power in the hands of the individual. And so far, it has been really receptive in this in the blue area of Gainesville. I've been surprised how much feedback that I received, and actually bring out voter registration. So there's people that's signing up as independent, and there's people that's signed up as Republican because they didn't know. So it's just to keep fighting and being a part of that good fight, and just knowing that, hey guys, it's okay to look at the Republicans, because almost everybody, they are Republican in their own right, and they don't even know it, because they feel like they have to have a heart, and Republicans don't have a heart. And I'm like, no, they do. They start chapters, and they start charities, and they're very philanthropic.
I have a trouble with that myself. I'll help you out.
Philanthropic, exactly. So, but I mean, and those are the things that I'm doing right now, and I keep myself busy to be on the front lines and fight for the GOP. I mean, there's nothing in my life that I've ever had that, I mean, I eat, sleep, breathe politics, and especially for the conservative party. And sports never took my attention that way. Or, I mean, I love it. I wake up every day. I'm happy as a conservative. I'm happy to tell people about this message. Like, why are you happy? So to me, it's like the gospel. I tell people it's up to you if you want to accept it or not. I'm not forcing it on you. So it's the good fight.
Well, you're clearly very passionate about it, Brandon. I appreciate you being on the show, and I guarantee you've made some friends in this audience without a doubt. And when you get back in our neck of the woods, let's hook up, man.
All right. I would love that. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Well, ladies and gentlemen, you just heard from Brandon Morris. As I say, he is the progressive's worst nightmare. I hope you enjoyed the show as much as I enjoyed bringing it to you. I hope you will like and share it. As I said, everybody can be a supporter. Not everybody can be a fighter. And Brandon surely is a fighter. So please like and share what we're doing far and wide, because the message of John Martin Talks, and especially a young man like Brandon Morris, needs to be spread to all four corners of the universe. I'm going fishing. I don't know about you, but have a blessed day.